Hello everyone, this is Inform New Hampshire. Welcome. Glad you stopped by. My name is Dean and this is Richie to my right, and this is our guest today, Eva. We're happy to have her here. We're going to do some talking about some of the family court systems, but prior to that I just want to mention that we have a YouTube channel called Inform New Hampshire. Hope that you'll stop by and hit the like button. We also have a Facebook page called also Inform New, sorry, it's not a Facebook page, it's a Facebook group called Inform New Hampshire. So feel free to join us there. Richie and I have been doing this over a year now. We got very concerned about the direction of our country, so we began to do, well, we were for a long time doing research, but Richie just happened to be a state coordinator when I found him for the National Liberty Alliance. I joined him there, and we've been working hard to get news and information out to the general public, you know, to inform people, hence the name Inform New Hampshire. So it's our mission and our goal to bring news and information and commentary that you won't find in the mainstream media. And it's not hard to do because most of what they do is fake, as you know, now that your president has informed you, even though most of us have known it for a long time. So we also want to mention Jerry DeLamus. He's still in prison out west. He was sentenced 2 weeks ago now.
May 31st, whatever that was, yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. I do want to mention that, I'm sorry, there's nothing funny about what I'm talking about, but it kind of makes me sick that Jerry's still sitting in prison since March 3rd of last year. Anyway, if there's any way that you can financially help Jerry and Susan out, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Go to freejerrydelemus.com. It's JERRYDELEMUS, and keep them both in your prayers. Don't forget about the ordeal that they're going through, because Jerry stood up for other people's rights, not his own. Well, actually, his own too, because we all have the same rights. If I stand up for you, I'm standing up for me too. And that's the way we should all think about it. We all have the same rights. We stand together or we stand alone. So please help out with Jerry and Sue. Keep them in your prayers. And hopefully there'll be some relief soon. By the way, I just want to also ask, send a letter to Jeff Sessions, the Department of Justice in Washington, and express your feelings to him. I did. I don't think he liked it, but I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. So just a couple other things about National Liberty Alliance. The mission there, it's a grassroots organization, it's nationwide, and the mission there is to restore the common law grand jury and common law courts to every county in the country. They've made a lot of progress, but of course, always the question is, where do you find enforcement? And you have to find some constitutional sheriffs for that sort of thing. They're hard to find because the corporate oligarchy is everywhere and in control of everything, and finding someone to stand up into their face is very difficult.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please do. Yep.
I forgot to mention, too, that if you send a letter to Jeff Sessions, because this is going to be comforting to everybody here in America. I was listening to Jeff Sessions' testimony today in Congress, and I'm not sure if it was him or one of the congressmen, but they mentioned that there were 10,000 attorneys working for the Department of Justice. And when I heard that, I felt fuzzy warm all over, you know, like everything's fine now. That's why we're in the shape we're in. Lawyers. I'm sorry, attorneys.
All right, so NationalLibertyAlliance.org, they have a fabulous
I don't like it.
they have a fabulous civics course. So probably it's second to none that I've seen. So it's 120 hours. It's free. Your kids can take it, you can take it, and you'll come out of that a different person. So
Next week.
dive right in and have a look at that, NationalLibertyAlliance.org. So we're going to talk about the family courts. And, of course, Eva is here as our guest today. Thank you for coming in. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, certainly. Glad you're here. Eva was fighting the traffic out front, and I was trying to save her a spot on the street, and I lost it right before she came down the street, and then another one opened up just in time. I waved her in. So it all worked out really perfect. So the family courts, Eva, you know, we've talked about courts a lot on our show, and Richie and I have been up, we were up at the courthouse, we were up in Concord a while back when Mr. Edelblum had his everybody come in and speak to the judge and
Yes.
the chief. Was that the chief judge? I think that was. Were you there for that?
I was not.
Okay.
although I was starting to have my turn in the family courts around that time,
Yeah.
I was not privy to the meeting or the kind of the movement at that time.
Right.
So unfortunately, I didn't get to participate in
I
it.
might be able to get you warmed up to talk about the courts if it's all right with you.
Here we go.
I'm a little bit shy about talking about them, but the court system in New Hampshire and America, but in specifically New Hampshire, they're all corrupt. Every single one of them is corrupt. There isn't a straight judge in the whole state. And I say that because there isn't a court of record which belongs to the people. Court of record is the only jurisdictional court that the people belong in, unless they're in the military or something like that. But for the most part, it's a court of record, and it doesn't exist. So all the courts have been co-opted, corrupted, cooed by the bar. And if people in America don't wake up, they're never going to get their court system back. And organized crime, well, it's already here. But it's going to get a lot worse. We have to all wake up to that fact. I hope that helps you warm up a little bit, Eva.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things I learned, though, was that there's no oversight for the family court system, and it had previously been under the jurisdiction of, I believe, the legislature, and then was removed from there. But there's nobody there
Right.
to slap their hands or to control them or to prevent their encroachment across your liberties, your freedoms, and your fundamental rights. And so they just run rampant across people's lives. And you know, one of the things that maybe we could get into when we talk here today is one of the most fundamental rights is property rights. And of course, your children couldn't be the more obvious property rights that you would have as a parent. And for a court system to send out a bunch of I don't know what I got to be nice here, but somebody who took a college course on socialism and goes in and gets a job to decide to walk into your house and tell you that you can't have your kids anymore and take them away. It's the most egregious violation of human rights and our fundamental rights that you could possibly endure as a parent or as a person, and probably as a child. So there's nothing that could be more horrific than what's happening. And the problem is that most people are content and happy in their everyday life out there, and that would include all those of you who are not watching our show today. And so there's nothing for you to be concerned about until it hits you and your family, or possibly one of your family members or close neighbors or something. You really don't have a sense of what's going on. So like Richie and I have pointed out for quite a while here, it is a mafioso-style criminal organization. It's part of a much larger worldwide syndicated crime organization that owns the United States Incorporated, owns the Fed, owns the United Nations, and it's just an international bankers who get off on creating destruction and havoc and controlling countries, and they write white papers about it. So I'm not just making this up. This is real world stuff. So
No.
back down to
I wanted
New
to
Hampshire.
jump in on this because it's very important, and I'm not sure, Eva, I'm sure it'll be informative for you. The United States Constitution, which you have in front of you, by the way, you don't have to read it. The Fifth Amendment, I don't want to put you on the spot. The Fifth Amendment, the last line of the Fifth Amendment in the Bill of Rights, this is the supreme law of the land. There is no the only higher authority is a court of record, okay? But anyway, the Fifth Amendment, last line says, "Nor shall anybody be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." Two things about that. Number one is due process is what is contained in here. It's the Bill of Rights. You must be served a warrant. It has to be done properly. You go to court, you have to have a jury trial. You must be entitled to counsel. That's the process that you have to follow. That's due process. Secondly, and I think is as important, when I brought my children home from the doctors, I said to people, "This is my daughter." I didn't say this is the state's daughter, because there's two things you got to keep in mind. And if all of us don't stick together on this and fight for it with the courts, we're going to lose the battle. And here it is. Either I own my children, and I'm talking about ownership of a human body, I own them, or the government. If the government owns your children, that's called slavery. And that's what we have today. And I don't even want to get into it, but nobody will come in and take my children from me. And not without a beef. Okay, I'll say that. It's one thing to knock on my door with a warrant and say, we got a warrant for you or whatever, and I go to court and I fight that battle. It's another thing for them to take my children without due process of law. You didn't prove anything, I'm not a bad parent, but you're going to take my kids? No, I don't think so. This other garbage with the family courts, and I'm saying that for a lot of people's benefit, Eva, is that this family court is fictitious. It's not even lawful.
You know, it's some people would probably say some of the comments that you're making are extreme and radical, and
This is the law.
but then you have someone like me and so many other mothers and fathers. This is not I am not someone who advocates just for mothers' rights. There are some very good dads out there who have gotten a very bad stint in the family court system as well. This is a parental issue. It's not a mother versus a father issue in this state, and in so many other states too. But you use the word fictitious, and I just want to drill down on that for a moment. Is that it is so true in the family court system how fictitious the statements are that are made, and they're incorporated into orders. And the moment that a guardian ad litem uses it, an attorney who is on the right side of that judge or that marital master uses it, or that judge, doesn't matter how true or not it is.
Did you say
it becomes
marital master?
Yes.
I've never heard that expression.
So family courts in New Hampshire also have marital masters. They're under the supervision of a judge in that court, but they will hear a lot of the cases. And I don't know how long it's been around, but it is something that I know, at least for the past 6 or 7 years, has been used in the family courts in New Hampshire. And so the marital master will oversee the case, they'll preside on it, they'll issue recommendations as per se, and then the judge will sign off on those, never hearing the case whatsoever, only hearing what that marital master has recommended. And so they have every effect of a judge in this state for the most part.
The marital master does?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without any lawful authorization.
That I'm not sure of. I do not.
It's not. This is the law.
Right. I do not know where in the state of New Hampshire, which is a good thing for me to start researching. I do not know where in the state of New Hampshire it's been authorized, but it's just like the new complex case docket that has come to be that I believe Judge Kelly implemented in 2015, and that was under administrative order. And it was developed in June of 2015, and myself and my children have been the unlucky guinea pigs of it since it was implemented, because we were one of the first cases thrown on that docket. And so
Would you like to go back to the beginning of
Sure.
how this started for you and tell us about it?
So I have 2 beautiful children. One is 13,
Yep.
and one is 5.
Okay.
I was married to my 13-year-old's father for 8 years, and we were together for 3 years before that. So we were together a total of almost 12 years
Right.
together. When that marriage ended, after it ended, I became involved with my youngest son's father, and we were together for 6 years. Although we were not married, we were together, we lived together, we ran our home together as a family, and we lived as a family for 6 years. Actually, I'm sorry, for longer than 6 years, but it began in 2008 and ended in 2014 with shortly after it ended, a domestic violence order was put into place. I was awarded a protective order due to physical and verbal abuse. I spent the entire part of our relationship hiding the domestic violence. It did me no good when it came time to seek out help. And I'll have to say that the state of New Hampshire, just as much as it lacks in the family courts as it goes to children, it is severely lacking on understanding domestic violence. And And that plays a lot of the role in a lot of these family court situations right now, too. I had that protective order for almost 3 years until it ended in this past April.
Did it expire, or was there another reason?
It was not renewed.
Not renewed.
And that's a common view of these judges, that they feel that, enough time goes by, there hasn't been any new incidences, so the threat's not there, which it couldn't be further from the truth. A lot of these individuals, you're dealing with narcissistic sociopaths. They are very good at staying quiet.
Right.
And it does not mean that the threat is not there, especially for individuals who have not entered into a program, who have not gotten help. And as my batterer to this day still says that it's a bogus DV. So there's that whole dynamic.
He's still denying it. Is that
He's
what
still
you're saying?
denying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says that it never happened. In fact, ironically, when we went for our final hearing, which was 2 years in the making, in September of 2016, for the first time, he alleged that I abused him. Nowhere in Guardian Ad Litem interviews or investigations was that ever alleged or in there, at least for myself or my attorney to see. And this particular judge took it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, no.
With no evidence either.
Oh, God.
That's why it's so important to have a jury trial.
It really, it is.
You have 12 people taking in the evidence as opposed to one person. And by the way, just 2 points I wanted to make with you is that one of the reasons that we have a jury trial is in common law, which is what these laws are right here. No one man rules over another. That's called slavery. That's why we agreed to a trial by jury. 12 people will decide. There are peers, okay? Not a judge. Judge isn't even supposed to do that. Secondly, I wanted to ask you, because I went through a divorce and I did a lot of things to protect my children. And I'm wondering if that's why you withheld the abuse thing. You didn't, you tried to hide it.
So
was it to protect your children?
Yes. It was constant fear for myself, as far as I lived under the constant threat that he would have my home and my children by the time he was done with me. No one would ever believe me. I did a good job of covering up bruises for many years. And then he got to the point where instead of hitting various parts of my body or slamming various parts of my body, the abuse became centralized around my head. So a lot of slamming my head into my refrigerator, into my windowsills, into walls, a lot of hitting my head. Well, you can see my head of hair. It hides bruises very well. I have
Obviously,
a permanent.
he's a coward.
I have a permanent blind
Sorry.
spot in this eye for the rest of my life. There is nothing I can do about it, from the trauma to my head. My neck bends in the wrong direction from the constant trauma to it. So there was always that fear of, and I had an overwhelming fear of he would be believed over me.
Right.
And there's so many women in domestic violence that a lot of people would say, how is that possible? And even my own family for a long time, why didn't you say anything? I don't understand why you didn't say anything. And people that know me knew a very strong, independent, career-driven woman that, how can you imagine that she would ever let one person control her like that? It's amazing what we do for love, or for what we believe is love. Yeah. And my biggest fear was that it didn't matter whether somebody believed me or not. The moment that he made an accusation back at me, whether I went for help or not, there would be an investigation. My children could be ripped out of my home. And my biggest fear was that my children being ripped out of my home, not knowing what was going on, and it being days or possible weeks till I was reunited with them. And,
Sure.
we think that that's not a reality. I see the reality every single day. There are so many women that I am in contact with now that I hear their stories, and their stories to some degrees are far worse than the issues that I've had to deal with. And I would have rathered the road that I've gone the past 3, 4, 5 years than one night of one of my children being in somebody else's home or some place where they were terrified. They lived with enough fear in our own home. You know, my 13-year-old at the age of 9, 10 years old being woken up in the middle of the night, being screamed at by my former partner and told that he's just as much of a liar as I am and to get out of my house. Now, mind you, this is a house I own. My batterer never owned this house. His name was never on it. But here was my older son and myself being kicked out of our home, and again being threatened, get out of this house. If you don't leave now, I'm calling the cops on you. And again, I've lived the life of seeing what happens when he makes a phone call to the police, and he's very charismatic. He's very friendly. We live in a small town. Everybody knows everybody. Not a situation that I was willing to take a chance on.
Right.
So we did. We spent a year and a half in the family court system in Brentwood, or just over a year in Brentwood. And in December of 2015, January 2016, all of a sudden, after all of the complaints I was making about a guardian ad litem who was not doing her job, the case gets transferred to the complex case docket in Dover. And this judge, this particular judge, likes his courtroom run very fast. He thinks that is efficiency with, shortness of time. The court case just was not given the amount of time that it needed. There were many allegations about the guardian ad litem not doing her job. Even her own testimony on the stand demonstrated that she didn't investigate the domestic violence. And all the judge saw was a 45-page report written. And because of the length of the report, he found it one of the, and I may use the wrong word, but it's a similar word at least, comprehensive reports he had ever seen in his career. Now,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because just because it's comprehensive doesn't mean it's true.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you read the report and, she claims to have met with certain people in person that she never met with in person. The one witness for myself or reference for myself that had solid documentation about witnessing the drinking habits of my former partner and the lack of care of my youngest child when he would be under the influence and such, she completely didn't include in her report at all. There were serious concerns with my former partner with drug use, with him and his former wife, and she never bothered to investigate it at all. In fact, this same guardian ad litem was under the scrutiny of the Supreme Court. There was a case regarding this guardian ad litem who someone brought a complaint against that in the family courts, and her standing ground was that the person was not truthful to her. Although she commended the person for changing their lifestyle and not living like that, she couldn't recommend regarding this individual because they weren't truthful with her. Well, there is my former partner not disclosing his drug use in the questionnaire, not disclosing former counseling that he had been in his questionnaire. And here she is on the stand saying to my attorney, based upon all the testimony that she's heard all of these, over the past 2 days, does she change her mind at all? No, not at all. And quite honestly, it goes down to the fact that she formed an opinion. She had an affinity with one person versus another. She liked that person. And so she geared her report, she geared her investigation towards proving that person the better parent instead of staying objective and being the guardian ad litem for my minor child and working towards his objectives, not towards either parent's objectives. This is a guardian ad litem that sat right in a room with my former partner, and we had just walked out of court one day. It was a temporary hearing, and the marital master said, I'm going to give each party some time to submit a written statement to me so that I can take it under advisement as far as what I'm going to do about these holidays. And so, of course, my attorney and I go into a private area. Well, the guardian ad litem goes and sits with him and his attorney, and the three of them, the guardian ad litem writes her statement, and they write theirs in conjunction with each other, and then turn it in. And sure enough, guess who gets what they wanted?
Railroaded, yeah. Someone gets railroaded in that deal.
So,
yeah.
And it was time and time again like that. There were a lot of documentation that I provided and that I had regarding the guardian ad litem, where I'm questioning the guardian ad litem. When are you going to meet with my child? When are you going to meet with my oldest son to investigate the domestic violence? And time again, she's either ignoring me or pushing it off until we get to within days of the court hearing. Now, there's nothing we can do at this point. We're within days of the final hearing, and she's still, all she says is that she's not going to meet with my oldest son because the other child would be there. So she's not going to investigate the domestic violence in my home because the children would be there. And it's just kind of a statement to that effect.
That's a good reason.
So then this guardian ad litem is on the stand, though, and she now says under testimony that she basically wasn't qualified to investigate it, that it should have been investigated by first responders and by individuals trained on how to handle trauma. She had a due diligence under the rules of professional conduct and under the guardian ad litem board rules to make that disclosure a year and a half before that she was not competent to handle this case. And she didn't. So, I mean, there's just been a lot of circumstances like that. A 54-page order written by this judge for parenting orders, where there is false statement after false statement by the judge himself in it. And then using such phrases, which I can't even believe in the age of 2017, we have a judge in the state of New Hampshire saying that it's his inference that I tuck my child behind my apron.
What does that mean?
To keep him protected
Yeah.
from the environment.
You were trying to do that, right?
But, I mean, we're in 2017.
Yeah.
And we have judges using biased, sexist statements like that, because I can guarantee you he was never going to make a statement that my former partner has an apron attached around him.
Right.
That right there tells you the sexist tone of our court. And how do you ever expect to have a fair representation under that? And I know you talked about juries. It's funny because...
I'd like to make a comment. Go ahead.
No, just to comment about the jury system, the fear, and I know that this is the fear that's out there, that juries would not be competent enough to make the decisions. They wouldn't understand the laws enough to make the decisions. Well, you know what? I do not have a law degree.
You don't need one.
Right. I don't have a law degree. At any day, I could be picked for a grand jury in the state of New Hampshire, and I would have to do my civil duty on that jury. To think that I'm not competent enough to understand family law. Well, after spending over $100,000 between one court case after another, between the domestic violence, between the family court case and a superior court case, I had to stop having an attorney represent me, and I had to become educated myself. I won a Superior Court judgment for over $70,000 against my batterer that I am now having to fight in bankruptcy court, because within a day of me filing contempt motions and motions regarding perjury and fraud on him, within a day of that hearing, we were scheduled for the hearing, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the day before that hearing, he walked in and filed a bankruptcy motion to stay the entire case. So now I get to sue him all over again in bankruptcy court, because the state of New Hampshire just doesn't finish what it starts in its family courts. And where this ties back to is that original DV. Under the DV protocols in the state of New Hampshire, there is a section in there that authorizes the judges to take whatever action, including regarding finances, to stop all of the areas of abuse, so that even financial abuse is stopped. I tried to get the judge to have him turn over my truck that he was driving around in, that I was paying for, and that he would not turn over to me. And the judge simply said in family court, he says he doesn't have the money to pay for it, so I'm not going to make him pay for it. Well, I didn't care whether he paid for it or not, then turn it over. Don't make me keep paying for something that he's driving around in.
He stole your property.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But because I was gracious enough to make sure his name was on that title at the time, too, and my name was as well, because his name was on the title, no police officer would touch that vehicle.
I'd like to just make a comment, Eva. This is my observation, and I have studied the law. I'm not an attorney, nor would I ever embarrass myself by saying so. However, I have studied this extensively, both the state and the federal constitution. And I went up, I don't know if you were there or not, Dean, but we went up to the State House and testified on this family hearing. I think it was last summer. And there was a chief judge of the family courts, which is another fiction and fallacy and fraud. And there was a senator there and someone else, and I don't recall the third person. I'm not sure. But my testimony was simply this. I turned it in written form. Basically, the family law that you refer to doesn't exist. There is no such thing as family law. There is common law, there's Admiralty law, and there's equity law. Those are the only three types of law in the United States of America. So this is the supreme law of the land. This is the supreme law of New Hampshire, the state constitution. The point I'm trying to make with a lot of people now, this is aimed at the viewers, the 5 people we got watching out there, or is it 6? There we go.
Careful, you scare them off.
I might. The thing is, people have to come to the realization, and I say this all the time, like you and like other people who are going through the same thing. The law is this and this. It isn't some fabricated thing that the bar attorneys made up. Now, I understand that that's what it is in the courts, but when the people stand up and say, no, enough is enough, the fraud's got to go, there is no such thing as justice in America now. It's money. How much money the corporate courts can make and extract from you and I. That's all it's about. They don't give a damn about your children. And to tell people, I'm ready to put it on the line, and I'm not talking about with guns or crazy shit. I'm talking about standing up to the people running the state saying enough is enough. I'm not going to tolerate anymore. I'm not going to participate in your fraud. Your children are yours. That's just it. If someone's abusing them, you have the right, and this is how it's supposed to work. You approach a jury administrator, which don't exist today, by the way, but you approach a jury administrator and you say, we're going to get a separation, me and my boyfriend and my husband or whatever. They have 40 days to act on that, resolve the issue with you two, as far as children, money, whatever issues need to be resolved. If they don't do it in 40 days, it's turned over to the grand jury. The grand jury hears the issue, and that's 25 people on the grand jury, and their decision is final and binding. So it behooves you and your other person to resolve that issue within 40 days. Because once the grand jury gets a hold of it, you got no say-so in the matter. But there's 25 people, and they're your neighbors. Because that's who it's supposed to be. Now, if you're sitting in judgment of me on a jury, indeed, you're going to sit there and say, well, I got to be compassionate because I understand what he's going through. We all should be compassionate towards one another, not be so quick to put people in jail, take kids away, or harm other people. or line the pockets of attorneys, which is what we're doing.
Absolutely,
The
and
bar
you're
has
absolutely
usurped
right. I
our
mean,
court system.
it is the amount of money that is going through these court systems is it's
Sickening.
appalling. It
Sickening.
is absolutely appalling, and it's destroying families. You know, my child, my ability to provide for my child and give him, both of them, the things that they deserve, has been beyond diminished. You know, I was financially well off. I worked very hard when I was very young, and I saved my money. I put it away, and thank God I did, because it's what's kept a roof over our head through all of this. But I was in a position that I was going to be able to retire in a year and a half from now. And I was still going to be able to afford to spend the money on keeping my oldest son in private school, having my youngest son go to private school, and be able to pay for college. I mean, I had done my work when I was younger. And
Oh, can I ask you a question on that regard? You must feel pretty good now knowing that the attorneys out there that are involved, and the judges, everybody that's involved in this issue, you're providing for their children.
oh,
instead
absolutely,
of your
I know,
own. So
I know,
isn't that
I know.
a warm
It's-
feeling you get?
It's beyond appalling.
It is. It's second. Believe me. And I didn't go through this. I've been divorced with my wife, but we had I forget what you call it now, a non-contestable divorce. We resolved it between ourselves. I don't want the government's got no business in my life. I don't want them in there. So stay the hell out of it. I'm sure you feel the same way, but sometimes it's easier said than done. I get that. But I'm just sick and tired of this stuff that's going on. It bothers me, even though I'm not affected by it.
It's
It shouldn't happen.
It's devastating, and it just shouldn't have to be that way, that people spend more time, and I call it slinging the spaghetti in these courtrooms,
Yeah.
and seeing what
See what
sticks,
sticks, yeah.
than actually spending the time to focus on the facts. And they're not, they keep creating these different venues. So they created the family courts and honestly, the family courts in New Hampshire have not been around all that long, but they created the family court to take the burden off of Superior Court. So then they found out that it wasn't working with family court, so now they've created the complex case docket to take the burden off the family courts to put it on the complex case docket. I will tell you, after living through the family courts and being moved over to the complex case docket and having my Superior Court case, because we weren't married, so I had to sue him, and because the family courts didn't do what it should have done in the domestic violence case, I had to sue him in Superior Court for all of those financial protections. I'll tell you, the Superior Court runs much more effectively and efficiently than the family court does.
Lower courts, yeah.
And all they did when they created that complex case docket is just move these cases over to there. That's all they did. They just picked a different spot. They're not doing anything different with these cases. In fact, they're creating the same circus over there that they had festering in the family courts. Now it's just all on one docket. That's all.
But you said something a few minutes ago where you said that they created the family court system. And my question to you, no, actually it isn't to you, it's to the listeners, is they created the family courts, but by whose authority? They're our public servants.
Right.
We pay their salary. Now, whether it's through taxes or their corrupt fines and fees and all this other garbage that they charge us, they extract from us. But I want to know by whose authority, because in this state constitution, it's not authorized. In Article 72A, which says the chief judge of the Supreme Court will have the authority to do this, that, and the other thing, that doesn't mean they can alter the law. They still have to abide by the law. There are public servants, and this is the people's law right here. I'm going to fight for this and this. I don't care about this other garbage because it's all about money. It has nothing to do with justice.
It does. And the longer they keep the three-ring circus going on, the longer the money continues to flow. My court case got no further time or energy spent on it. In fact, this crazy court case that I have with my youngest son's father got less time than my former partner's case on the family case docket when his marriage and circumstances were going on. So and even my own former partner, when we went back to court with my ex-husband, even that got more time than this case has gotten. So it blows my mind that this was considered such a complex case. It was only given 2 days. There were so many allegations regarding this guardian ad litem not doing their job, and not any time was given by the court to investigate that whatsoever. So now I have to pursue that with the guardian ad litem board. I also have to pursue an appeal with the Supreme Court, which I've already done. I have one Supreme Court case that I just submitted my brief for a couple weeks ago.
Finished writing that. I saw
I finished writing that, right?
That. Yeah, I saw
so,
you on Facebook.
you know, and I guess what I want to say out there to anyone who, for any reason, thinks that they cannot do this on their own, you are so sadly mistaken. It is a lot of hours. It's a lot of work. I will tell you, there are many nights where it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning that I'm going to bed because I am a single mom. I own my own home. I work full time, and I'll be darned if I'm going to let, this interfere with me being a great mom to my kids. So it's the kids go to bed and I start working on my court cases. But you can do it. And the world of information that's out there between Google and everything else, you just start asking questions on Google and you'd be surprised what the information that comes back is and what directions it will lead you in. But you just have to believe in yourself that you can do this.
I'd like to ask you a question in that regard then. Since I've been studying this, and it's been a number of years for me, I feel empowered by knowing this. Because, 15 to 20 years ago, I didn't know this. And by the way, I was in law enforcement. So to walk around acting like I knew what the hell the law was and not knowing was pretty embarrassing. I came to grips with that. I understand this now. And it is empowering. I want to ask if you felt the same way from your education.
Absolutely. It's kind of ironic when I can be sitting there in a courtroom now and I can listen to an attorney start to give whatever rhetoric they want to give, and I will just sit there and I have to stop myself sometimes because I start to laugh because I'm listening to them and everything that's coming out is not accurate, and I'm sitting there jotting down, okay, they're misquoting this, they're misquoting that. I spent the better part of January, this past January, battling back and forth with my batterer's attorney, where this attorney tried to say that the family court is not the proper, I think, jurisdiction or venue for domestic violence, which it is. And so I literally, and then she started battling over Rule 1.25. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but biggest mistake you're going to make with me, I don't care who you are, is tell me that you're going to quote something. If you think I'm going to take your word that what you're quoting is truthful after everything that I've lived within the court system, you've got to be kidding me. So I'm going to sit there and research it. And sure enough, 3 times I had to go back and forth saying, this attorney has an obligation under the rules of professional conduct to state whatever they're stating truthfully and candor to the tribunal. And not once is that person ever being called out. Not once are our judges, and I have 3 different judges, 3 different venues, and not once have any of these judges ever called this attorney out on the failure to follow the rules of professional conduct that she took an oath to. And that's another just appalling aspect of the family court system right now, and it's
Again,
sad.
I'd like to point something out to you, to the listeners, I should say. Because, you don't often think about this, but you get into a family situation, you have to get an attorney. Or you do get an attorney, I should say. The other side has an attorney. And then you've got a judge sitting up there. All 3 of those people are attorneys.
I know.
Their interest is the bar. It isn't you. That's why the deck is stacked, and that's why it's got to change.
They're all in collusion.
In common law, which is this, by the way, this is common law, and this is common law. It's the law of the land, not the garbage they're feeding us now. All right? There's no need for attorneys. Why do you think they got rid of the court of record in New Hampshire? We've done the research, believe me. They've got rid of it for that reason. They don't want you to have your remedy in law, which is the court of record. And check that out. I'll direct you off the year to
Sure.
figure that out. But they took that from us. We are the sovereign. It says so right in here in Article 7. People of this state. Not the government, the people. They've taken that from us. They've taken the court of record from us, which is our remedy in law. That's the only remedy we have. Now we're into this fictitious jurisdiction, and we can't get anything done. All they do, and I've seen this, Dean can attest to this, it's not like I'm making this up, with Steve and his place, and with just so many people, I can't go through the names. Everybody that I know of, they just keep extracting money, and I swear they have some type of crystal ball where they're looking at your bank book saying, we're almost there. Jesus, this person's got a lot of money. Let's keep going. A couple more weeks, a couple more months, and they'll be pretty well drained, and then we'll walk away from the case. I swear, that's what it seems
you
like.
know, and I would have to say, I don't think you're too far off from the truth there. If you took a look at both of my cases, if you looked at some other cases that I'm aware of, they have a system for how they drag this out.
Absolutely.
Just like a company, when you apply for credit, can do a credit search and a background check on you. They do the same thing, so they know your assets and they know what's there.
Well, they see your, I mean, you have to submit financial affidavits.
Yeah.
You're submitting all your financial records anyways. They know what they know what's there, and they know how far you can go. And
You're submitting those financial records for the benefit of the attorneys. It has nothing to do with your children.
and 90% of these cases, and I really don't believe I'm off on that figure, 90% of these cases that are going through the family court system, they take these financial records, they have the guardian ad litem fees. You start reaching the point where, okay, well, we've exhausted X amount of money, they can't afford it any longer, and there's so many good parents out there who just say, well, I can't afford an attorney anymore, so I just have to give up because I can't do this on my own. And I thank my lucky stars that, my parents gave a wherewithal within me that I just don't know when to stop, or to me there is no stopping. These are my kids.
God bless you.
There's until I'm taking my last breath, I will do everything that I can to make sure that their rights and my rights to be their mother are protected. And so if that means that I'm up till 2-3 o'clock in the morning, every night of the week, then that's what I'm doing to make sure. And ironically, I about 3 weeks ago filed my second Supreme Court appeal. This particular judge, I finally had enough evidence, I finally had enough documentation to demonstrate that the information that was provided at trial, at the hearing in September, there was enough not factual information, there was enough circumstances that had changed that warranted a hearing on parenting modification. And he allotted us an hour. 1 hour, that means each side gets a half an hour, which means that really each side maybe got 15-20 minutes to talk between interruptions and questions and everything else. And supposedly, and here's another railroading, right? Supposedly, this was to determine if there were enough factors that would warrant a hearing for substantial change to make a parenting modification. Well, instead, this judge decided to take that 1 hour hearing, even though it's on the record, I'm repeatedly saying this is not enough time for me to present all of the documentation needed to support a parenting change. I'm asking that if these are the type of issues that would warrant it, though, not the evidence, but the issues that would warrant it, that you schedule a hearing with the appropriate time to address all of this, which even included back in September, this judge calling me on the cusp of contempt because my claim for contempt on my batterer was frivolous. because I claimed that he was putting my child in an unsafe vehicle. That truck that that I was talking about. Well, that very truck, when that Superior Court judge ordered him to turn it over, finally, after 2 years, ordered him to turn it over, there was the documentation. Every single thing that I had been saying about him running this vehicle into the ground, him putting my child in an unsafe vehicle, there were basically no brakes left to it, 0 mm and 2 mm. There was a rotted tie rod. The rotors were completely rotted. It would not pass a safety inspection. It would not pass a safety inspection to be on the road in the state of New Hampshire. Yet that judge called me on the cusp of contempt and that my claim was frivolous. So my child drove around in a vehicle that had basically no brakes. And so that was just one piece of that documentation.
Right.
Well, after all of that 1 hour in court and that beautiful motion that I wrote with all of the reasoning why, I got a one-word answer back from that judge. Denied.
Oh, God.
So now we are going back. I've now filed another Supreme Court appeal to appeal my right to a fair trial and to due process and to be able to be heard in the state of New Hampshire for my rights as a parent.
I'd like to make a suggestion. I'd like to make a suggestion to you and to the listeners, but I'm not offering legal advice. But it's food for thought if you want to look it up. In here, the United States Constitution, the supreme law of the land, it says in Article 6, Paragraph 2, all judges in every state are bound thereby. Now, I got to assume that if all judges in every state are bound to this book, that means judges who reside over a family court, because it doesn't make any stipulation otherwise. If your rights have been violated in the family court system, look into filing a case in the U.S. District Court under 18 U.S.C. Section 241 and 242 for these clowns violating your rights and sue them personally. Take their home, take their pension, take everything you can take. And I don't care who hears this, because these judges are so corrupt. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. If they violated your rights, if they haven't violated your rights, and by the way, if you don't know what your rights are because you haven't read the state or federal constitution, then you're on your own. It's our ignorance that's killing us. And Eva just said it, she feels empowered since she's learning this stuff. I felt the same way about learning this. But I'm learning the supreme law of the land and the supreme law of the state. That supersedes any of this other garbage that they come out with.
And it's funny that you kind of said that, and I don't mean funny, but it's ironic that you brought that up. There are quite a few parents in this state right now that are on the cusp of that federal lawsuit. And more than likely, before the end of this year, if not by the end of next year, there will be that federal lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire for failing to... it's kind of like the Department of Labor. In the Department of Labor in the state of New Hampshire loves to use the phrase of, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it is a duck. And if you have policies in place, those policies mean nothing if you don't do what you're supposed to do to enforce them and follow them. And that's kind of the trap that the state of New Hampshire's gotten in with these judges, is that it's not holding them accountable. There's filings going to the judicial code, judicial board for the Judicial Code of Conduct violations by these judges. There's filings to the ADO for the rules of professional conduct on these attorneys. And they're just not doing anything with it. It's not my problem.
Now, every one
You
of
can
us,
go do something about it if you want to, but it's not my problem. Well, it has to be someone's problem.
it's all of our problem. Every one of us wants justice in our courts. What we don't want is corruption in our courts, but that's what we have today. And until the people come together, you people that are involved with the family court system, if you've had your house taken away from you, I guarantee you it's 100% unlawful, unconstitutional. And any other time your rights are being violated, we should get together and demand. All I'm asking is that we demand justice. If there's something wrong with that, maybe they should put me in prison, because I believe it.
Let's not go that far. But well said, Richie. Eva, you occur to me as a person that's very brave and very committed, and I just really want to thank you for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot to put that out to the public, but by doing that, you empower others. I know there's a lot of groups of parents who get together and they study this law on their own time, and they have their careers at the same time. And I've met a few, and Richie and I have talked to a few, and I've recently even started collaborating with someone in California that's in the same situation. So, on behalf of them and everyone else, thank you for what you do, your courage and your tenacity, and thank your parents for raising such a good woman to fight so hard for her child and for what's just and what's right. So great job.
How much time do we have?
We don't have any.
Okay, good.
Thank
All right,
you.
I want to thank everyone for watching. Whoops, there goes my
Time.
alarm. All right, thank you for tuning in. We're going to be back
Thank
next
you.
week.
Thank you, Eva.
Eva, thank
Thank
you,
you.
and we'll see you then. Have a good week.